Hey everybody, it's Jimmy from the DIY and Digital, and today we're making a removable city block. Welcome back everybody. First of all, if you haven't already, go and hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit that bell icon so that you don't miss any updates like this video. So today we're going to be working on some of the buildings that are going to go in my town scene, and what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be making a removable section of a city block with 3 DPM kits attached. Now the reason I'm doing this is because if I want to do detail or change anything, I want to be able to take it away from the layout and be able to work on it on my workbench rather than risking some of the other scenery on my layout. So that's what we're going for this. I've seen a lot of people do this before, and I'm going to show you guys how I do it. So let's get started. So I'm going to be a little bit weird here, and I actually build my city blocks and we are removable on balsa wood. I know a lot of people do it on styrene, but I do it on balsa wood because it's a lot easier to get that rough concrete texture on something like this versus a smooth sheet of styrene. So I'm going to be putting 3 buildings on this particular section. Now this actually doesn't make up a whole block. It's going to make up a section of a block. And so I'm going to take these first 2 buildings and give them just enough space for a little alleyway. And then I'm actually going to take the 3rd building and I'll make the space big enough for a vehicle to drive through. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my square to draw the edge on the other side of this section of the city block. So I'm going to line that up, and then what I will do is I will take a Sharpie and draw a line. It really doesn't matter that I'm using a Sharpie because I'm going to be painting over this whole thing in general. So the Sharpie makes it a lot easier to cut, and it's just really quick and easy to mark, especially when you're holding something like this. So after I do that, I use my square again, and I go ahead and cut the edge of the balsa wood. I really heavily score it, and then I'm able to snap the balsa wood section clean. And I still do this very carefully because, for those of you that know, balsa wood is fairly fragile, especially in larger sheets like this. And then once I'm done, I go ahead and position the buildings and make sure everything is okay and good to go, and that I like the way that it looks. So now I'm going to go ahead and mark little dots where I'm going to cut holes for potential lighting of the buildings. This way, before I get into the messiness of painting and everything, I'm going to go ahead and have these holes cut. And I just take my utility knife and I cut these holes. And it's really quite easy. Balsa wood is so soft that you can cut through it with just about anything. So I'm going to go ahead and cut these holes, and then what I do is I just sit there and I make these little squares, and then I just pop them right out. Now it's time to paint, and I'm going to be using an airbrush. You can use spray paint, you can really use a brush. The reason that I like the airbrush to the spray paint is you don't get any brush strokes. I know a lot of us don't have access to an airbrush, and that's okay. Just make sure you do something to keep the brush strokes away. And the wood helps with that because it is fairly rough, so you're not going to have too many brush strokes so long as you put on 1 or 2 coats of paint. The one last thing you want to make sure you do is that you get the little edges along the side so they make sure everything is good. And then once you're done, you can leave it to dry. Now you want to not get too worried because it is going to bow a little bit as it's drying, and then it'll flatten back out. First off, apologies for the camera. My camera went out of focus, and I don't know why. I set the focus before, and I couldn't repeat this step with the camera in focus, but I'm using some model putty, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. And what I'm doing basically is I'm just using this brush. Now, when you use a brush for this, you can only use it once, so make sure it's not an expensive brush. I'm using this putty to really simulate concrete. First of all, it's gray, and it's that really good concrete gray, and it dries very flat. It also adds some of the roughness to it, and it's going to make it really easy to cut little lines in the concrete for the concrete sections. So after that, I'm going to go ahead and press my buildings in place so that I get the exact spot. And I want to do this while the putty is still drying. And you don't want to press too hard, but if you have it nice and thin, it's not going to do anything to your buildings. So when I have those buildings on, I take my 90-degree square, and since it has measurements on it, I go about every 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch, depending on what it looks like for that. So now that my camera's back in focus, I glue the buildings onto the block using some white glue. And the reason that I do this is in case I need to remove the buildings. I don't want to destroy the block itself, since balsa wood is fairly fragile. So if I just use white glue, the buildings will pop off fairly easily given just a little bit of force, but they're also going to stay in place for the most part. Now the next thing I'm going to do is optional. You do not have to do this, I just wanted to do this. I'm putting a little bit of white glue down, not too much, and I'm going to be sprinkling a little bit of ballast that's going to simulate a gravel area in behind the buildings, just as kind of like a little loading area. So I put my ballast into a cup and I just gently sprinkle it on. Again, you don't have to do this. This is completely optional depending on the look you're going for. You can make it look like asphalt or dirty concrete or anything you want. The last step that I'm going to do is I'm going to do some weathering with my DIY weathering powders. And if you want to see how I do that, you can check out my tutorial on how I build DBM kits. I'll link that right up here as well as in the description below. And what I basically do is I grind up drawing pastels on a piece of sandpaper and dump them into a cup. They work really well as weathering powders. And what I do is I just gently put some across all of the concrete simulation, and this really accentuates the lines that I've drawn on the concrete, and it also gives it a good weathered, aged look. Now I'll also put some in the gravel as well. This gives it that driven on look, and it looks really, really great. And overall, I'm very happy with the way this weathering powder really ages stuff quickly. So here is the final product. Now I still do have a lot of detailing to do. I'm thinking of some water transfer decals and all sorts of stuff and a few little cracks to seal up. But overall, I'm very happy with the way this looks. You can see how the weathering powder really accentuates the cracks in the sidewalk and the lines in the sidewalk. So that's how I make a removable city block. So that's how I make a removable section of a city block. I hope you guys really enjoyed that. And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and hit that bell icon so that you don't miss any updates like this video. Until next time, I'm Jimmy from the DIY and Digital. Happy railroading!